This is Harris's opportunity to define herself and Trump's opportunity to define Harris. So it's going to be a very high stakes affair, given that the election is already very close going into it.
Good to have you with us. So we've got this national poll that suggests a narrow lead for Donald Trump. How significant do you think this is?
Well, I think the polls just naturally will go up and down a little bit over the course of a campaign. Any one poll might bounce up and down due to sampling error and things like that. I can't speak for the Time Siena poll because YouGov wasn't involved in that. Our own poll shows a 2-point lead for Harris over Trump, but the difference between a 2-point lead for Harris and a 1-point lead for Trump is not a lot, given the inaccuracies inherent in polling. I think the safest way to describe the race is that it's close.
Yeah, too close to call is what we've been hearing. Would you go along with that?
Certainly, there's no certainty about who's going to win right now.
Yeah, it is an incredibly close and exciting race. Of course, the way the presidential contest is decided, it comes down to those key swing states, doesn't it? Just explain, remind people listening how that works and why those states are so important.
Of course. So in the U.S., it's not the total national popular vote winner who becomes president, but in each state, the national popular vote winner, with some minor exceptions, wins that state's electoral votes, which are based on the number of members of Congress that state has. And then those electoral votes are added up to determine the actual winner. So it is possible, as we saw happen in 2016 and in 2000, for the candidate who wins the most votes nationally to end up with fewer votes in the electoral college.
And so then it comes down to those states which could go either way because we know exactly which way many of the states are going to vote. Texas is going to vote Republican. Florida is going to vote Democrat. It comes down to places, doesn't it, like Pennsylvania, Arizona. What are the polls telling us about what voters are feeling in those key swing states?
Well, YouGov recently conducted a swing state poll with the Times, in which we polled voters in Nevada, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona, which are widely seen as some of the most important swing states. And we found is a big shift from where we were before Joe Biden left the race. Back in July, when we did a similar poll with the Times, Trump was leading in all 7 of those states by between 1 and 7 percentage points. Now Harris is leading in 4 of them and trailing in the other 3 by 2 points or less. So it's certainly a close race. It's by no means, but way too early to say that one candidate has it in the bag or even has a commanding lead. But it's a much closer race than it was a month or two ago before Joe Biden dropped out.
And what are the big issues, do you think, for voters in those key states?
Our polling continues to show that inflation is the number one issue for voters, inflation and cost of living in general, and the economy. Many voters, especially Republicans, are concerned about immigration. A number of Democratic voters are concerned about abortion. But consistently, inflation and prices and the economy are the number one top issue.
Interesting the way that certainly what we've seen here in the UK is that the polls themselves can actually play a part in a campaign. So people may vote tactically, or they may decide that if, for example, they can look at who is the best placed candidate to defeat the one they don't want to be successful, they plump for those. But when you've got such a close race as this, how do you think the polls affect it? I mean, do you think it just makes it more likely that voters will actually go? Because there is an awful lot at stake here, isn't it?
Well, certainly it's going to be a highly impactful election, and I think the campaigns are going to be spending the next few months trying to make people think this is the most important election of their lifetime, and that if they don't show up, the country will be ruined. That's increasingly standard fare from American political campaigns. One thing that we'll be watching at YouGov over the next few months is the question of the divergence between the congressional races and the presidential race. There have been some signs in past races that some voters want to vote for a balanced government. So if they think one presidential candidate is likely to win, they may be likely to vote for a congressional candidate of the other party to balance that. So there's where some tactical voting can come in. It's unclear how big of an issue that is, but we'll be conducting polls to try to watch and see if that's going to be a major issue or not.
And of course, the big event coming up tomorrow night is going to be that presidential debate, the TV debate, almost certainly the only one between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I mean, how significant do you think this could be?
All these debates can be huge and have had the potential to move the polls in major ways, as we've seen in recent elections. I think this is especially true with a candidate like Harris, who is not especially well known. Our recent survey we conducted with The Economist found that lots of voters want to hear more from Harris. 36% said they wanted to hear more from Harris in the news leading up to the election, and just 22% said they wanted to hear more about Trump. So this is Harris's opportunity to define herself and Trump's opportunity to define Harris. So it's going to be a very high stakes affair, given that the election is already very close going into it.
And of course, we saw how the performance of Joe Biden at the previous debate when he was still the Democratic candidate. I mean, his performance there was the beginning of the end of his bid for another term in the White House. So, I mean, these events, these occasions have so much riding on them, don't they?
They do, and particularly in the U.S. news market, there are not a lot of events that get truly national viewing audiences, like major shares of the country. But presidential debates are one of those events that huge shares of the country do tune into. So it's a rare opportunity for a candidate to speak to a truly massive national audience.
So,
Our recent poll found 3/4 of both Harris supporters and Trump supporters say they're going to definitely or probably watch the debate.
yeah, I mean, it's going to have a huge audience, isn't it? And talk us through how you think each of the candidates are going to be approaching that.
Well, I certainly can't speak for how they're doing. Each candidate is doing debate prep. Uh, the candidates are going to, in any debate, the candidates are going to try to hit their talking points really hard, try to make their case for why they'd be the best person to lead the country and why the other person would be the worst to leave the country. And I think Harris has the most riding on her because, again, she's much less known, much less defined in the public eye. Uh, the voters say they want to see more from Harris, and we're going to be watching our polls very closely after the debate to see not just who voters say won the debate, but to see whether views of Harris shift. Right now, Americans have more Americans have a favorable view of Harris than have one of Trump. So we're going to be watching to see if that changes, if her favorabilities go up or down after the debate, uh, and see if that impacts then the horse race numbers.
And we heard there from one of her campaign ads, which was all about attacking Donald Trump, talking about some of the senior Republicans that have turned against Trump, including his former deputy Mike Pence. Now, both campaigns have definitely used them, and Donald Trump wastes no opportunity to attack his rival, Kamala Harris. Do they work in terms of turning public opinion?
Uh, the short answer is yes. Attack ads do work and essential. Everybody hates attack ads and bemoans the presence of attack ads, but the fact that they work is proof by the fact that everyone keeps running them. We did ask recently with the Economist YouGov poll whether they thought Trump and Harris spend more time explaining what they'll do when president or attacking their opponent. And Americans are more likely to say that Harris spends time explaining what she'll do, 51-39, and more likely to say that Trump spends time attacking. 59% said Trump spends more time attacking, and just 33% said that Trump spends more time explaining. But both candidates will do attacking. That's just essential to politics. And campaigns have to find the right balance for a given campaign between how much of their money to spend on ads, sending a positive message and explanation of what they'll do for the country and who they are as a person, and how much to spend sending a negative message. And there has to be some of both in order to do a winning campaign at as competitive a level as the U.S. presidential election. But what exactly that balance is, there's no science to it.
Yeah, and just finally, we've talked about how close this race is. And if the results are tight when it comes to election night after the polls close on November the 5th, I mean, is it likely to take a while for the final result to come through, do you think?
It really depends. I say most election nights, we generally know who wins on the night of the election. In the 2020 election, it wasn't until a number of days after the election that the networks called it for Joe Biden after some of the very close swing states finally finished counting and it became clear that Biden had won those states. There had been indications that Biden was ahead and that he was likely to continue to be ahead. But until the count got finished and the recounts and all that, there wasn't certainty. So it's possible that we'll know on election night here in the U.S., the morning after in the UK, or it could be that we'll have to wait several days or even longer.
Well, it's going to be an absolutely fascinating election and a fascinating race. Thanks so much for joining us, David Montgomery, senior data journalist and pollster for YouGov US.